Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and Laura will be joining me sort of as co host or another voice today because our guest has a lot, and Laura have a lot in common. They've had a lot of the same sort of issues and struggles and whatever in life. So I thought it would kind of be interesting to let her join us. She's been here before. And she's always the note taker, so you guys get to see the pretty girl.
I'll do a little bit of both.
The pretty girl note taker today, right?
I love it.
Anyway, so continuing on earlier in this week on Strange Mosaic, which is more my sort of outer world analysis kind of show, you guys got to meet my friend Jesse Barth, who is a listener of here on my YouTube channel, and he's become someone that has become a friend, and he's made some choices in his life to affect greater change in the outer world. And it's really more of an outer kind of thing. And because internal alchemy is more about personal transformation, we talk about sort of the inner world here. I'd like to introduce you guys to another member of sort of someone I met because she's a listener, and full disclosure, she's also been a client, but Patti Lucia, is it Lucia or Lucia?
Lucia.
Patti Lucia is here today to kind of talk about how her, she contacted me sort of right at the beginning of the pandemic, and she wanted to make some changes in her diet and her health. And over time, it really grew into a big change in her life. And so she's here today to kind of talk about that process. And, again, me kind of honoring the people that I've met on this journey this year. So Patti Lucia, welcome to Internal Alchemy. It's nice to have you.
Oh, thank you, Emily. It's nice to be here.
All right. So you pretty quickly at the beginning of the pandemic, sort of, I kind of really started doing a little bit more push with the nutritional stuff then, because I was hoping rather than sit and cower in fear, people would reach out and say, I'm going to take this time when we're not really able to do anything else to get healthy. And you were one of the first people to jump at it, and you've been one of the most persistent. So can you kind of let people get to you a little bit by kind of telling us a little bit about you, but also sort of, how you had some struggles throughout your life with food and body and all of that kind of stuff. Can you just kind of give us, a little background so we can get to know you? I know you, but so they can get to know you.
All right. Okay. Well, so again, thank you for inviting me. This is such a thrill. So my story with my relationship with my body, let's say, began when when I went on my first diet at 2 months old. It was during a time when the doctors were thought very differently about weight gain and so forth, especially in girls. And so at 2 months old, I was put on a diet of skim milk, taken off breast milk and so forth. And that was kind of my first diet. And really through my life, I had always had kind of a thicker, more muscular body that at that time was not seen as feminine, was not okay. And so I've spent practically my whole life on and off diets. And a lot of that was, was something I was imprinted with as a child. And so it's been a very long and conflicted relationship with my body, in accepting my body. And I think, and then throughout the years, I felt better and more attractive. Of course, when I lost weight, less attractive when I gained weight. And when I moved through the menopause process, it became more and more. I was always athletic, and so when I was younger, I played soccer, softball, and all of these kinds of things, and ran. I was a runner, and that kept things in check. And then through menopause, and then aging, of course. You can't do some of those things that you do when you're younger. And so I was really struggling. So even though I had made this commitment that I was going to keep my weight in check through my menopause years, it was very, very difficult. And there's a lot more to the story. I'm a teacher, I'm, a writer, a teacher, and had owned a cafe for 10 years. And, that was a whole adventure. But I at the beginning of 2019, I had made a commitment that I was going to get to the root of the weight thing. Okay. So I was going to leave no stone unturned. I was going to get to what's going on emotionally, what's going on physically. I had my microbiome checked. I started reading books about body, about, the body positivity and everything. I wanted to get to the core of whatever it was that kind of kept extra weight on my body. Whether it was emotional and so forth. And and then I tried all kinds of diets too, so I tried the macrobiotic diet. I tried vegetarianism. I had already tried veganism and didn't work for me. So that was already a done deal. I knew that that wasn't going to work. When I had my microbiome checked, there are some, we don't know how accurate that is, but let's just say, according to the microbiome test that I did, a lot of the things that I would have relied on for protein, let's say if I was a vegetarian or a vegan, were not going to work for me because my body apparently did not like those things. Like doesn't like beans. Big surprise, right? A lot of people don't like beans. Quinoa, yeah. So basically, but I was fine with poultry, red meat, most fish except for like lobster or whatever. There were the things that my body was not okay with. And so I looked at the results of my microbiome and I was like, no wonder it didn't work as a vegan, or even as a vegetarian. So that was kind of an eye opener for me. But anyway, I continued to try to, leave no stone unturned. How can I, how could I, lose this, this weight? I went through and I've tried, so I tried different diets, different approaches. The macrobiotic diet there were some things I liked about it. I was definitely moving processed foods out of my, completely out. I had eliminated dairy. And then I tried, I think before we met, before I called you, I think I had tried the paleo, and I liked a lot of things about the paleo, and the paleo helped, but it didn't take it far enough for me. So I still had issues with with maybe with bloating, with some digestive issues and so forth. And so and when the pandemic happened, I'm a teacher, the schools got closed down. I started doing the distance learning and everything, and I had more time. I had a lot of flexibility. And and I'm a follower. I've been listening to your stuff for a while, and I thought, I'm going to call Emily. I'm going to send her a message and say, hey, let's see if we can figure this out, because I'm kind of at a loss here. And I thought, basically, I took it as far as I could take it in terms of my knowledge, my skill level, and but perhaps my level of, commitment or emotional fortitude. And so I felt like I needed help. I needed to reach out and have help in kind of uncovering this and figuring out, because I wasn't just interested in, oh, I want to be thin and sexy. I wanted to really feel good, because I have good health. But I was now you're kind of thinking about longevity and moving into, I just turned 62. And so I want to, be as healthy as I can, healthy and vital, and have that vitality, and knew that the weight was increasingly going to be an issue, in terms of my vitality and my overall health. And so that was it. So I reached out to you, and so we've been on this journey together.
Okay, so you said a lot of stuff there, and the first thing I want to respond to is the one stone you hadn't yet turned, right? When somebody has turned every other stone over, they finally find the weirdest one, and they're like, oh, there we go. And that's how we met. So I'm so glad you reached out. One of the things I was struck by, and this is something, and I'm going to pull sort of Laura in here, and part of the reason I had you on the show was because so many women, there's a lot, there's men and women of all ages in my audience, but there's a lot of women who are probably in the same age range as you, who both are finding that certain traumas that they were just something you don't talk about.
Ooh.
Younger are things that I talk about. So they're sort of willing now to start dealing with processing that and how that relates to the health of their body and how they deal with food. And we've all had some, whether not every woman has struggled with weight. We've all struggled with some body image at some point. And I know this one for sure has, but I had to watch my weight a little bit when I was younger because I was an athlete. I was a gymnast. I was never overweight. Nobody, quote unquote, put me on a diet, but I sure watched any of the girls at the gym who weighed too much get in trouble. So I knew that that was someplace I didn't want to go. So there was a consciousness about it, but I was never put on a diet other than when I started doing it to myself at some point in my teenage years. But she had told me that, her mom put her on a diet when she was 10. And I thought that was young, but you have just hit it out of the ballpark with 2 months old. I've never had anything like that before.
Yeah.
So you've been basically, since they put you on skim milk, you've basically been starving since you were 2.
That was 2 months old. Yeah. 2 months old.
2 months old, right? That's, I think of how unsatisfactory anything diet or light is and compared to the actual food. And so for a baby who doesn't have the cognition to anywhere remotely understand why one might be eating something that is less satisfactory than something else, that has to start a process of satiation anywhere you could find it. And that sets up all sorts of scenarios later. So
absolutely,
I thought maybe if you had something to say about early dieting or whatnot, this might be a place for you to pop in.
I was actually 12. I think I was around 12, and I was starting to develop breasts and a butt, and everybody in my family looks like a stick, except for me. I look like a curvy road. And so my mom decided that she needed to put me on a diet and just nip that in the bud right away so I didn't get fat. And so I went on, she put me on essentially what I would be doing later as a bodybuilding diet, which was boiled chicken breast, plain rice, and green beans. There's no broccoli at that time. At least in South Dakota, we weren't eating broccoli.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that in the 70s there was broccoli, but
not in South Dakota. It didn't come out of the can. We weren't eating it. But so, I was also put on skim milk. All the fat was removed from my diet.
Yes.
And I think it was something psychologically, I felt like, okay, I'm like kind of put outside the camp, right? I don't get to eat what everybody else. There's something wrong with me.
Yes.
As an adult now with hormone problems, I'm looking at, okay, maybe the setup for the hormone problems was way back then when I didn't get the fat I needed. I was put on a restricted diet of 1,000 calories a day. And I was a gymnast, and so I was probably working out too much and not feeding my body enough. And what did that do to my thyroid? What did that do to my hypothalamus? What was that doing to my adrenal glands? All of those things that I think set me up later in life for food allergies, thyroid issues, sex hormone issues, lots of issues. And I would be willing to bet that contributed to your issues as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was traumatic. And we have similar, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old stories about dieting. They put me on Weight Watchers, I guess. And so, I was always on and off diets, especially as I approached puberty. They thought I was going to lose my baby fat in puberty, and it just kind of moved around a little bit, I was, to hips and breasts, and that's kind of, and that was also traumatic. But, it was an ongoing sense of that there was something wrong with me. Because there was something wrong with my body. And also it was really tied in, honestly, too, with my sexuality, because I was a little tomboy. I liked to play with the boys. I liked the sports and everything. And there was a lot of, and they sensed that. And so, so that also was tied in. And there was a lot of, there was a kind of, and I know this sounds really backwards, but I really do believe that my parents believed that if I was thin, I would get a man and not be gay. And so if I had extra weight, then men would be less attracted to me, which means that if I had any inclination at all for women, then there was the trap. And it was just, and the thing is that I was, I was kind of falling for girls since I was like 9, writing love letters and things like that. So I was well on my way. And I think my parents were aware of that. And there was an association with weight, and that if I was thin like my sisters, my heterosexual sisters, if I was thin like them, then I could be as heterosexual as they were. And it seems like insane. Like when I'm talking about it, it seems kind of insane, but that's kind of this crazy reality that I grew
But
up
I
in.
think there's always, I have known very few. So I having come from an athletic background in gymnastics where weight is very, very focused on. And then also, in working in this field to a certain extent and talking to those people, I have very rarely come across somebody who has just a weight issue, whether it be that they are overweight or whether it be that they have an eating disorder. There's always something else wrapped into it, right?
Absolutely.
Or even if they don't present at the exact same time, like most people I know who had severe eating disorders were also either at some point either an alcoholic or a drug addict, or a drug addict, or had some sort of sexuality issue, whether that sexuality be what the nature of their sexuality was, or sexual abuse or traumatic stuff, and oftentimes three, right? So like I can't think of I know a few people who maybe they struggle with 5 or 10 pounds here and there, and they don't love it, but it's never really been a big deal for them. Like they sometimes don't have something else going on, but whenever you get in a situation where there's this crazy thing going on with the body, it generally either generates another issue off of it or has one come that it's sort of wrapped in with it. Puts you in a really interesting position though, because here you were okay, you've had this weight issue, right? And you wanted to be in some ways more feminine, even though you liked to do the boys thing. The two things were not in your head, you probably could have been both feminine and like to do boys things, right? But here you are.
I just wanted my parents to love me. I didn't want to feel like a stranger. Like I did feel a little estranged in my family growing up. Like I did feel that distance. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I wanted to fit in, however that looked, but I wasn't sure. I don't know if I could have helped myself in terms of how I was, because I liked being in the woods. I liked climbing trees. I loved all those things, and I felt best.
No. What I meant though was that you had a desire to look thinner and feminine, but that changed your interest in doing the things that were considered more. So both things in a world where our parents didn't feel the need to control that stuff for us, you could have had feminine and liking to play boys' games could have both existed simultaneously, perfectly comfortable, right? So they had created this weird world where the things were attached in this other way. And then you also find yourself at a certain age developing hips and breasts, but being called a tomboy. So then not understanding how that works either. So, that's like a crazy amount of.
I mean, talk about femininity. I first of all, I developed faster than my sisters. My breasts were bigger. I had a body that was much more womanly than my sisters. But what that created was more trauma, because all of a sudden overnight they hated me and I didn't know why. So now it was all about breast envy. And I didn't even want the things. I wanted to unsnap them and give them to someone. I don't want these. How can I climb trees and play football with the boys with these things? And, and that's kind of was my attitude. So it was really kind of this schizophrenic thing. Like they hate, why are they, I really didn't. It was just kind of I was like a stranger in a strange land, like 11, 12, 13 years old. I have these breasts and then boys and men look at you differently. And so the girls kind of hate you and the boys are ogling. And it's like, hey, I just want to play football with you. What, whatever, man. Yeah. So it was very, it was very strange, and I was kind of forced to go get a bra. I didn't want a bra. I wanted to wear my undershirt, and my mother literally dragged me because it was kind of like there was like this. It was seen as indecent. No, you need to strap that up. You need to kind of strap that up. And I was like, I don't even want it.
Tell your story. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's a good story. I was in 6th grade, and I remember my mom asking me if I wanted to go to the mall, because the mall was a thing then. It was kind of a brand new thing, right? And I'm like, sure, I'll go to the mall. And we ended up at JCPenney's, and she's like, okay, we're here to buy a bra. And I was like, what do you mean a bra? She's
Yeah,
like,
she
well,
trapped you.
notice that you have little breast buds that are poking out through your white shirt, and that's not acceptable. So we need to get a bra. And I just hid. I hid in the racks of clothes so nobody would see me while my mom was picking out bras. And what about this one? What about this one? And I was just like,
Yeah,
I was mortified. So
it is mortifying. Yeah, yeah.
what was the story?
That you were mad because your brother got to run around with his shirt off. And you
Oh,
didn't.
well, I
Oh, I know. I hated that.
was like 7 years old when but they made me put a shirt. I wouldn't even have breasts at that point.
Right.
But they're like, well, you're a girl, you have to wear a shirt. And I was like, well, my sister Meredith, who was 2 years younger than me, she doesn't have to wear a shirt. Well, but she's younger than you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't look any different on top than my brother or my little sister do. So why do I have to put a shirt on? Well, because you're older. Like, it didn't make sense. But I felt the distinction there. Like, okay, it's not okay, A, to be older, and B, it's not okay to be female.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if there's something wrong with you if you're a female.
Yeah, and if you have in the larger the breasts, the bigger the problem. No, really, it's a big it was a big problem. I had a friend in middle school, and her name was Leisha, and she had the biggest breasts in junior high, and the smallest waist. Like, she looked like she was 24, and she befriended me, and I learned a lot about dealing with breasts from Leisha, because the teachers would ogle her, the boys would ogle her, all the girls hated her and thought she was a slut. And and I asked her, it's like, how do you is that okay with you? And she was like, they're idiots. And she just kind of did her thing, wore what she wanted to wear, do what she wanted to do. And she was just like, they're just idiots. And so I kind of I have felt a little comfort hanging out with Leisha, whose breasts were bigger than mine, and she had no breast envy of me in junior high. She buffered the trauma.
So, okay, let's sort of like switch directions here a little bit. I do want to get to sort of the process that we went through in terms of changing your diet and starting to really shift how you felt about yourself when you came to work with me. But before, I do want to touch on something that you and I have in common, and that is the way you're sort of like, you worked for a long time in the restaurant industry. You were a restaurant owner. Yeah. And sort of the way that changes also your relationship with food. Like, when food becomes the absolute center of your life. I mean, largely if you come from an Italian family or a Jewish family or whatever, or any
happen.
Almost any family, right? The food is the center piece. You have your meals together. It's always part of parties and social life and stuff like that. But when you work in the restaurant industry, then not only is your like family and celebratory life and socializing life around it, so is your work life, and the way that they spill over into each other. And suddenly, like, almost every minute of your day is somehow like related to or connected to food. Mm-hmm. And you're around food all the time, and that sometimes becomes hard to develop a healthy sort of balanced relationship with it. I certainly had issues with that. Sometimes more just in terms of like, I'm one of the people that I'm eating all the time. Like, I just, all the time, like at the, if there's something to pick at, I'm picking at it.
Yeah, I'm a picker. Yeah. And that was something that my mother used to say, you pick, that's your problem, is you pick. I'm not sure that was my problem. But it's a little more involved than that. It was because you took me off breast milk, Mom.
How-
Don't blame me. But at any rate, no, I didn't. I never said that, but you know, in retrospect. But you know, here's the interesting thing about being in a restaurant business. So my restaurant, it was a tiny little cafe, and it started off as a coffee house, and it evolved into a cafe because I was having trouble, you know, paying the rent on coffee and sweets and whatever. So I started expanding my menu. So in the beginning, I mean, I'm kind of a natural in the kitchen. So I had comfort food. You know, I had mac and cheese and you know these different things. Now the folks who are coming around my cafe, and this is how I was influenced by food ideology. So actually food ideology had a big impact on me and my eating and my food attitudes for a while. And I actually had to detox from the food ideology after you know, after my cafe closed. So there were mostly vegans who came into my cafe. So when I started expanding my menu, they were like, you know, vegan food. And so I developed a whole line of veggie burgers, mostly bean based and some sweet potato and just all kinds of things. It was up to 20 veggie burgers. I had vegan sauces. All my soups were vegan. So I kind of created this way of like making hearty vegan food. Like, oh, you vegans are starving, so I'm going to feed you and you're always going to be satisfied or whatever. So I ate a lot of that kind of food because that's the food that I was making. And also there were just more and more people coming in to my cafe who had that ideology and were very passionate about it. So sometimes they'd give me a hard time. It's like, wait a minute, do you cook eggs on the same griddle as you're making my vegan veggie burger? You know, and things like that. So it was a little, you know, it got really intense, but I was influenced by this food ideology for years in my cafe, and then kind of felt bad like when I tried to be vegan and I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't really pull it off. And you know, people would often ask, well, are you vegan? And I'll be like, no, not really. But that's kind of that's
So for you,
there are those.
it was more of an ideological influence that it had in your life rather than like, for me, it was very much lots of happy hours after work, right? That kind of stuff. Lots of fancy meals out with the same people I worked in restaurants with. We'd then go out and have fancy meals at someone else's restaurant, which was all fine and good, except for there was times when I found myself like every night that I worked, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning at the bar, all that kind of stuff. And so for you, it was more logical, whereas for me, it was maybe more indulgent.
Yeah, you know, because mine was just a tiny little cafe and mostly for lunch, you know, so I didn't serve alcohol, you know, it wasn't that kind of, it wasn't that kind of place. And so it was definitely the ideology that, that I struggled with. And
it still left you feeling like a failure, like your
yeah.
other experiences with relationships with people around food.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It really did. And you see, I was also in the midst of my spiritual awakening. I was reading all these books, a lot of the books you're familiar with, you know, I was just soaking it up. And so so it just happened to be that at that time, that's what I was going through spiritually. Right. And you know, so I'm influenced. I'm very influenced by the ideology because if you're, you know, wanting to be a more spiritual person, then of course you have to be a vegan because that's the more spiritual thing to do. If you want to, you know, raise your vibration and be more conscious, then you have to be a vegan. And so I felt like I was a failure at being a vegan and also a failure at wanting to be spiritually awake.
Yep.
You know, it's like, damn, I can't really, I'm going to be stuck here. I can't evolve any further because I eat, you know, poultry.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It was like, it was kind of, and so that's what I mean. It was kind of the ideology was kind of a bit of a clusterfuck for me in the end. And so when my cafe closed, I had to detox from so much of that and kind of get my bearings again. for me in my journey, in a, my authentic journey, who I am, in the world, not influenced by these ideologies. A lot of the detox was really just kind of saying, okay, I'm unplugging from this. I'm unplugging from this. I'm going to be solitary for a while because I really need to, I need to become centered again in myself and in my own, what are my beliefs? I don't know. Let me take some time to figure that out. So it was quite a process after my cafe closed, to kind of detoxify myself from all these ideologies that were kind of messing with my head.
So I think this is a good spot to sort of transition into where you and I met, because I do remember, so you went back to teaching and whatnot in Over Cafe, but when we started working together, that was actually the place that you were at, was you weren't really wanting to see your old friends because you were wanting some distance, as you wanted some distance. I'm imagining this is me making it up because I don't know the details for sure. You tell me if I'm right. You had already been going through some of this, trying to figure out where you were at spiritually based on the fact that you had failed at veganism. So you were wanting to deal with that, but also you had come to a place where you recognized that if you were going to do something for your health, you had to do what was best for you and not judgment of other people. Right. And so that was about the time that you were coming to me, right? When you had kind of done some of that and you were.
Yeah, like I was following more of my intuition, trusting myself, and it meant that part of that process was stepping away from people who had been really close to me, but were a very big influencers in this ideology, like in my head and in my ear, and it's like, you know what, I've got to step away. Love you guys, but I've got to create some space between us. Yeah. In that, say that again.
Isn't it weird? Like this, what you just said, and I think everybody in the audience can laugh about that. I have to be a vegan to raise my vibration, and we've all sort of been there, right? But I think the time when my vibration ever felt lower than the year that I was a vegan, I was barely vibrating at all, right? Think about movement, nothing to say, pale in the face, tired, right? Like. Barely vibrating at all.
And hangry.
Fucking hangry, seriously. So okay, so let's just move to, you came to me and you came to me with that you had this struggle that you've been going through life, and that you wanted to lose weight. And while we did that, and we're going to talk about that right now, it also became like it opened up another process for you about really dealing with some other buried emotional kinds of issues. In the beginning, really, we were mostly just dealing like with food, and it, I kind of really liked the way our path went together, because we kind of started with like just eliminating things here and there and seeing what worked for you and what not, and we can go through a little bit of that if you want, but like, basically, when people come to me, I start everybody at the same spot, which is basically a certain type of elimination diet, not the standard one that if you look up on a natural health website, elimination diet, but I take people down to a space where the diet they're eating is going to help them to rid their body of yeast, fungus, parasites, bacterial overgrowth, all that kind of stuff, and then see both from like my own intuition and the person's natural tendencies and what seems to be working for them, like where we're going. Because staying on that diet long term becomes, it's just you can do it for maybe a year, but most people start to develop a tendency towards something else even before that. And so sometimes I send people off down the route of keto or paleo, or in some cases it had been like a Mediterranean, or if people wanted to do vegetarian. Really quickly, I discovered when I started working with clients that veganism is not diet I'm going to recommend for anybody. I'll work with someone if they're a vegetarian and willing to eat eggs and do some other things, but that's become less and less. And then at a certain point, people started asking me about carnivore, so I've been doing that with some people. And you had already known that you didn't want to do vegetarianism or paleo or anything like that. So after we kind of stripped it down, that kind of left playing with, sort of keto and then carnivore. What I liked about the way our process kind of went though, was that you were having, in the beginning, you were struggling to have some success, right? And then almost when you started to have success, you almost rejected it. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So can you, and in my head, that was like, oh, this is interesting. She's wanted so desperately to lose weight for so long, right? And then now it's starting to happen and she's like, I don't know if this is going to work for me. Do you remember that?
And I can't remember that. What were the actual circumstances? Do you know? And then I'll jump in.
So, so we had kind of gone down through sort of a candida diet and you lost maybe a few, not what you were looking for, right? And kind of thing. And so we decided we were going to start doing keto, right? And you started doing keto and it took you a week or two to get to the place where you like were doing keto, right? But then you decided on your own that you were going to start taking testing, doing keto tests every day. I never told you to do that, but you started doing it, right? And you were going to hold yourself to make sure that you were in ketosis all the time, which I never even mentioned, right? So it was hilarious. So then you wait, but you also you started having some, there's a keto adaptation period, a keto adaptation phase.
Yeah.
And it does take a little while to adapt. There's keto flu and you kind of went through all of that. But you did actually start to get the weight loss that you wanted, but you were like, oh, I don't know about this. And what was funny to me was that you had taken on doing this testing to make sure you're in ketosis all the time. Meanwhile, had forgotten to take the supplement that I had recommended for you that would have mitigated some of those things. But I do think there was something else going on an energetic level where like you weren't yet ready to accept the weight loss either because you had been right. Like, so you were just kind of, I think you were like a week into it, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this kind of thing, right? Even though it was working, you were getting what you wanted. So can you sort of remember that period of time?
Yeah, I do. And realize that, it was, and I think that it's a process and I continue to go in and out of that. But it's that resistance. It's like you get to a particular point and there's a certain kind of resistance to going forward. And I think that's and I still think about this, and I think it's complex. And so we can put it in very simple terms. It's like, oh, you're just, resistant because of this and whatever. And we might over psychologize things, but I actually think that there is it's kind of complex what's going on, because the body is having its reactions, the fat is having its reactions, like there's all kinds of stuff going on, and it is expressed like, I don't know, or it's expressed in subtle sabotage. Like, oops, I was doing that, but oh no, I didn't do this, which was like so obvious to do, and it was clear that that's what you were supposed to do, and yet you didn't do it, or like, things like, well, it would help if, like drinking water, like, like, what's that about? I mean, there's the water, there's the glass, there's the, so, and so I think that I found it interesting to just kind of look very hard at some of the things that I was saying, like in any excuse, even if it seems like a completely valid excuse, it's like, well, look, what's really going on here? So, so that has been, and I think that I think in this process, I find that I go to deeper and deeper levels of just being real with myself. It's like, how well do you really want to get to know yourself? How much do you really want to self-nurture and self-care? and love yourself. How are you really committed to this? Because this is what it takes. So I have to kind of remind myself of that and recommit, because there are these subtle resistances that I experience and I continue to experience. And so then I have to kind of, first of all, I don't want to judge myself or blame myself or, be shameful, be ashamed of it, but like ask myself the questions. Okay, what's really going on? What is this? What is this about? And so that continues to be a process.
So what she's talking about here is, and this is, we started doing this, and I do this with not all my clients because not all of them want it, but with a number of them, is starting to bring some of the life coaching and asking the bigger questions in, because the food really just, sometimes somebody just has some sort of dietary issue that is pretty basic and whatnot, but generally there's all this other stuff wrapped around it. Yeah. And so we started to look and ask these questions, and the most satisfying point for me comes when the client, and in this case you, and because this is all about my satisfaction, right? I'm just kidding, is when they start to have the right intuition, right? So obviously you had been coming from this point where like your intuition was not good. You were eating a diet that was completely not good for you at all because of social pressure, because of whatever you thought. And you had a microbiome test and it revealed that to you. So you started to try and figure stuff out, and you recognized you needed help. And then you came and, we started to lose weight. We went through a few things. And 1 week, when you had some success, with keto, but things were just not exactly right yet, I had the thought in my head, like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, but I don't try to push carnivore on people because I don't think it's right for everybody. And I know it feels extreme to a lot of people, and some people are very offended by it. But I had the thought while I was out exercising, like for a variety of reasons, I think carnivore might be good for Patti, but how am I going to bring it up? Right. And then in our very next session, you came to me and you said, hey, I think I want to try carnivore. And so to me, and what was interesting is that was the first of like what started to become a series of very good intuitions. And you and I haven't really talked about this because I was kind of reflecting on what our process has been before we did this.
Yeah.
A lot, even once we went into carnivore, like we tried doing things in cycles, we tried a few varieties of it. You have a very stubborn metabolism that you can trick for a bit, and then it gets used to it, and then we have to come up with another trick and another trick, right? To a certain thing, and one of the goal is to find something that is you can stick to and is manageable and whatnot. But what I liked was like you started to do things where I would give you something to do, and sometimes you'd still be resistant, but you would generally like problem solve yourself, like I didn't do that, but I did this, what about this? And they were oftentimes very good solutions. And so then we have like not only a knowing that like I think this is the path I want to go down, but like anything else, like I'm assuming that you as a teacher do not do things the same way all of the other teachers do, but you have to get to the same endpoint, which is this many kids passing your class, their testing grades being like this, all that stuff. And so you have to engineer a way that is going to work for you, but still sort of satisfy the requirements of the ridiculous school board. But the diet in some ways is the same thing. How can I like eat in a way that I can manage, that I will reasonably enjoy, and that will have the health benefits? And you started doing that. And so, like, was there something that started to switch for you? Did it come with the carnivore diet? Where was the point for you where you started to feel more confident in knowing how to make good decisions for yourself with eating?
Wow. I mean, that's been, I don't know if there was like a specific moment. But I will say that I was very, very conscious of the process I was going through when I decided to do carnivore. So it was diametrically opposed to like just about everything that I had learned, like, and these ideologies and, even stuff I had grown up on. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint to answer your question like in a pinpoint kind of way, but I there was a process in which my body was responding positively to what I was eating. So there was a disconnect between how my body was feeling and what my mind was saying. Right. So I had to kind of work through that.
Blaming you for doing a carnivore. It was still like, this doesn't make sense. It was
It's like, you're going to have a heart attack. Yeah. What are you doing? This is so not spiritually okay. Like it's kind of like, and I was just like, shut the fuck up, man. This kind of feels good. So I was, I was kind of like, I want to listen to my body.
So I think, and what's interesting that I sort of noticed is at a certain point when we got into the carnivore diet, the focus really stopped being about losing weight in terms of pounds, right? Obviously, like that still is part of the process, but you started saying things to me like, I haven't really lost any weight, but I notice I look different in my clothes and I feel good, right? I feel good. And you started to have more confidence and you started going out socially again and you started dating again. And all these things.
Oh yeah. No, it was transformative and like my thinking became clearer. My emotional stability, my mood was more stable. And so my mind was clearer, my mood was more stable, and my libido was like, hello. Hello, remember me? I'm back. And so, I had to do something about that. So, and I did, but it's kind of like that, all of that was, hey, so Patti got her groove back, and that's what, honestly, so this is, hey, it's been great. So I started, I started kind of thinking, wow, this is really, so there were a lot of things that started happening all at once. And it was like it was kind of a cascade of things. So you say, and I joke, it's funny, right? Oh, my libido's back, ha, ha, ha. But here's the thing. Then I started having more sex. But here's the thing about that is that I had to I started working through some of the stuff about my body and about my sexuality and about how I felt about my body and did I feel attractive, and all of these things I started working through, and all of a sudden, like, I'm feeling good and I'm freaking 62.
Well,
and I'm like, whoa, this is, and so it really turned on its head. It turned a lot of misconceptions on their heads about all kinds of things. And so that has been a revelation in many, many ways.
So it's really interesting, right? So I had my friend Rob Stewart on the show back also around the time, it was about the time I met you, about that.
I love him. I love him, by the way.
For him, that is now some people do counting their protein and their fat and they're checking their ketosis and whatever. He doesn't really do any of that shit. He pays attention to biomarkers. And one of the biomarkers for him is morning wood, right? Which sounds funny to say, right? But it's, what we started this conversation talking about was how being on a diet restricted the production of proper sex hormones and also affects brain health. So you're not thinking clearly and your body's not working. And like, whether we want to accept it or not, like the humans are supposed to have sex and it's not supposed to just be one time to make a baby. Like that's
right.
The healthy body work, right? As much as we'd like to think of ourselves as, pure of everything and whatnot, that's not how the body works. And so what's interesting, and this also goes back to the beginning of the conversation, is you had come because you had been through this time where, okay, like I want to manage my weight through menopause, but I'm not able to be as active. Well, that's turned out to be total bullshit.
That's total bullshit.
62 years old, exercising almost every day, running miles, swimming laps, doing weights, right? Dating, having a happy sex life that you thought you had said goodbye to in your 50s and you were just trying to manage. So these were all things that you came to lose weight and to feel better about yourself. But I don't think you expected to end up younger than you were 10 years ago and more energetic and no. I love that. No. You have to say?
Well, I was just going to say that I'm wondering if you've noticed that your vibration is higher. And are you aware that like sex is a spiritual thing? So
Oh no, absolutely. And you know, that's the thing that was one of the things that I differed with many of my spiritual friends who are always wanting to meditate out of their bodies, not be in their bodies. And consequently, and because they were vegan, that, you know, sex was like, you know, it's really, you know, and they would kind of rationalize it by saying, well, it's really not that important because it's a lower chakra. It's the root chakra and the sacral chakra. And I want to be in the crown chakra. I want to be up here, you know, not down there, not in the root chakra. You know, I mean, honestly, that's how people talk. And I'm sorry. I'm just saying. And so,
I mean,
and I'm like, I like my root chakra. I like my sacral. And, you know, I want to keep them humming. Thank you.
right,
And
so
so I want to keep them all humming.
Congested. It's when you get congested that you get dry and brittle and you're not creative and
Exactly.
you don't love life because those chakras aren't activated.
But
Absolutely.
this
Yes. Yes.
what you're saying is so funny because, so first of all, yes, in the natural health, spiritual, new age-ish community, there is definitely like chakra chauvinism going on, right? For sure. But when
It's like there's a hierarchy. Like, since when was it a hierarchy? It's not a high, you know, it's like, but it became one.
it's an obvious hierarchy because one the other at the bottom. This one's obvious. But when she was in India for her yoga teacher training, right? Like, I remember at one point getting an upset text from her because, like, you know, she, like, the teacher, one of the assistants or whatever, had said she was too Svadhisthana or whatever, right? Like that she was too in her lower chakras, and she was upset because she wanted to be in her, you know, her third eye and her crown and you know, in touch with all this stuff up here and that. So it's like it's a real thing. I mean, when people get abducted into the cult of new age spiritual, like, health kind of stuff, like, this is a process that goes on, right? And it's like this, like, you know, in some ways it's the same thing that we go through to a certain extent, like in the truth community or whatever, levels and things like that. And all of them are important, right? Like, so another way to think of our spinal cord, which is where our chakras, you know, are sort of aligned with, right? It's a ladder, and you can't get to the top if the bottom rungs are not working, right? If they're broken, if they're flimsy, if they don't have energy, and like, it actually, like, makes sense that you would, you know, get to the top faster if there's a little fire lit under your ass down there on the bottom rungs of the ladder. You're gonna climb quicker, right? So, I do think that, like, when you, and this doesn't mean that it has to be carnivore, but when you find the right diet for yourself, that is one of the things you should notice is an increased and regular libido, you know, right? Like, and that your body, whatever the fuck story your mind is telling yourself, your body wants to do that. And so the best, when you have gotten your diet to help you bring your body and your mind into balance, is when you get to the place that your body wants to do that and your mind is no longer at war with it over that desire. And you found yourself in that spot. Absolutely.
It's a sweet spot, by the way, no pun intended. I mean, like, no, but it's very, very true. And that's one of the reasons why I love Rob Stewart, is because he does talk about these biomarkers, and I've been paying very close attention to my biomarkers. So yeah, there's the libido. There's also how well you sleep. There's your mood, bowels, all of these biomarkers that I've been able to say, check, 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 check. Like, my biomarkers are kind of rocking right now.
How, like, we get into all this complex shit when we try to bring spirituality and like whatever into our diet, where we're doing all this weird and crazy stuff, but most of the people who are doing that weird and crazy stuff aren't having sex, aren't sleeping, and aren't taking a shit. And they're angry, right?
And they're and they are.
It is something to, like, eat, drink, sleep, shit, have sex, and whatever. And if you're not in a healthy relationship with those things, then everything else is going to be out of whack. And so, you know, I find it interesting that we're taking oftentimes our intellectual and spiritual cues from people who either haven't pooped for a week, you know what I mean, or are really fucking hungry. You know? And I don't think that I don't think that that's an accident. How we've ended up where we are when that's the situation is not an accident to a certain extent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's a hardcore agenda.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, you know, and you really see it because people, you know, have that kind of that evangelical or that born again kind of look in their eyes, and it's like, wow, you know, it's kind of it gets a little freaky. So yeah.
And to be honest, it exists in the carnivore community too. Like there are people out there who look down on people who eat anything that isn't carnivore, and that's ridiculous as well. And you know, from the time I've spent sort of swimming in these waters, like I have found myself and all the people that I feel are pursuing this earnestly, right? Like not where they're trying to build a cult I think it's okay if you know things to have a business where you help people, but it's different than trying to really monetize some huge business kind of thing. The people who are earnestly seeking after a certain period end up in a place where they're like, okay, what I basically eat is an animal-based diet, right? Where I'm eating a lot of protein or fat and I'm supplementing it with the plant foods that are the least toxic or the most enjoyable to me at the level that it works for me. And that's all that stuff is a personal decision. So just like the idea that we can all ascend together is stupid, the idea that we can all eat the same diet and vibrate together is also retarded.
I totally agree. It's an individual inside job. Like our enlightenment, our spiritual growth, everything is really about individual. And I honestly, in our healing process is also an individual, you know, journey. And yeah, and I think that we will do more for the collective consciousness, right? The collective, by being committed to our own healing journey and self-nurturing journey. We'll be able to do far more. So, you know, we were talking about being creative. So in this process, I had made a commitment to get this book written, right, in 2020 at the very beginning of the year. And I didn't know there was going to be, you know, a pandemic, lockdown, and whatever. But what happened,
you had made that commitment before you met me, before we started working together, correct?
I had made that, yes, I made that commitment in January, but I didn't really, you know, I just didn't know how I was going to pull it off or whatever. But what was interesting about that project went through so many transformations, and I was able to publish a book that is really, really moving people. Like it's really having an impact on people. And by the way, the very first story in that book is Weighty Matters. That's the title of the book. And it starts with the diet I went on when I was 2 months old.
Okay, we're going to turn to your writing and your creative project.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Now just a second. I was going to go next, but Laura had a question based on something you had said before, so I'm going to let her.
Well,
yeah.
I was just curious because I've done this carnivore stuff as well. I'm not that successful at it, but I'm curious if you had this experience that I had where I felt guilty and almost could shame myself over eating vegetables or a piece of fruit, or like I just can't quite eat meat all day and I feel like I need to have that, a couple of peach slices or some broccoli, and so I'm wondering if you have that experience at all.
No, I mean, I have been really careful about the vegetables. And I feel like if I was, you know, what I feel guilty about, to be honest with you, Laura, is like, I love cheese. And so, and you know, Emily, I'm going to be this true confession. Emily has said, look, Patti, maybe every other day. Well, yeah, that I haven't, you know, I'm working on it, but you know, I've had a thing with cheese recently, and that I've had to kind of nip in the bud. So and I know that it, you know, like I probably overdo the cheese. So I'm working on that. You know, I'm not sure if I feel particularly guilty, but I feel like, oh, I need to, you know, I need to do a course correct on that one. But no, I don't necessarily. I like romaine, and that's the vegetable. That's my go-to vegetable right now because I like my salad.
So she is very unique in that. So she feels guilty if she doesn't eat vegetables because she's always been told she should eat her vegetables. And also she feels guilty if she does eat vegetables, because then she's worried she's not doing the carnivore diet right. So it's impossible that there would be someone with this much tendency towards guilt who's neither Italian nor Jewish.
Were you raised Catholic?
No,
I'm Scottish
Wow.
Protestant.
right? So she just has a magnetic attraction to feeling guilty about something.
Yeah.
And she likes gurus too, ones that tell her when she's vibrating right and stuff like that.
Well, I don't know how much of an opportunity or you've had to kind of do to really kind of take a look at the whole guilt thing, but I've really kind of I have dove. Anyway, I've really kind of gotten into looking at guilt and releasing it as my, being really, really conscious of when it comes up and releasing it, because what I've come to is that it is a roadblock to whatever progress, whatever progress I'm moving towards. It's a roadblock. It literally stops me from progressing from wherever I am, even if that progression is getting to know myself better or getting to care about myself better. Like guilt is it stops you in your tracks. And I honestly think that's the function of guilt. I think that's why we've been imprinted with guilt, is to stop us in our tracks. So I hear that and I think, whoa, you've got to be a really fucking powerful person if, guilt is messing with you like this, because you release some of that stuff and you're going to be like, who knows what you're going to be doing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I see. Like guilt, I see it as kind of like a tool of the system to hold back powerful beings.
I think that's very smart, Patty. I think that's exactly right. So I want to turn to now creative stuff, because one of the things that I've actually admired about you since I first got to know you is you're very good at being like, okay, so first of all, you either like to or have found some way to get yourself to do it, even if you don't like it. Do all the things that people always tell me I should do, but I don't want to do, because right, write stuff down, keep a blog, start an Instagram page, where people can keep track of what you're doing. And I really let's just be honest. I think you know this. I think Laura knows this. I think all the audience knows this. Really, what I like to do is talk. I like to talk to people, and anything that requires me to do something that is going to distract me from getting to talk with people, I generally don't want to do. But you're both personable and chatty, but you also are incredibly disciplined with, I'm going to sit down and spend this much time every day writing. In the beginning, you weren't quite sure what you were going to be writing, and it's taken many twists and turns over the course of our getting to know each other, and ultimately it's turned into you writing several things. But you have really taken two things. This time out, you were all on collectively, because we've all been on collective time out, right? You've taken that time to get to know yourself, get to change yourself, and to change what you're doing now in the outer world. So now we'll shift the conversation from what's going on inside of Patty's body and her mind into what she's doing to, reach out to other people. But also, I don't think you're going to be a teacher in a public school system that you don't love so much for much longer, because you've opened up all these other roads for yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and sort of the track it's changed, right? First, you were just kind of journaling, right? Journaling the idea that you're going to write a book by the end of the year. And then suddenly, you got onto something and it's generated all this other stuff. So tell us a little bit about that process.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to start with the concept of discipline, because I'm really glad you brought that up. So I'm a very creative person. And to be honest with you, I was resistant to discipline. Hey, I don't need to be disciplined.
Yeah.
Say that again. I'm the creative person, right? Well, one of the things that part of my commitment at the beginning of the year was that in the process of self-nurturing, self-care, and self-love was discipline. Was that because I applied discipline in my profession and where I need to, but I realized I hadn't applied discipline when it came to my own personal endeavors. So why is that? Wasn't I worth the discipline? Wasn't I worth the same discipline that I gave others, the same commitment I gave others? And that was a hard question for me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to turn that around. I'm going to be really conscious. I'm going to be disciplined. So discipline, actually, that was a shift for me. And it was a shift that I think was made smoother by this whole internal process I was going through towards self-nurturing, self-care, self-love, and so forth. And, all my pistons firing. Also, I got to bring that up again. But at any rate, the journaling I had been doing, and the journaling I had been doing as part of my own spiritual journey, because as a way of, and also, there's a woman, Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, and there's the concept of morning papers. And so for creative people to get up in the morning and write these morning papers, it's a way of, if there are things on your mind, you get rid of them so that now the rest of your energy can be spent on creative endeavors, not on the crap that you just wrote down in your journal, right? So there was that. And also, just on a spiritual note, just to be very conscious of, and I journal with my students too, but journaling is such an important tool because we can measure our physical growth and development, right? And on a scale with a measuring tape. But when it comes to emotional growth and spiritual growth, you just wake up one day and you say, wow, things have really shifted and changed, but I'm not really sure how I got from there to here. So keeping a journal really does allow us to kind of chronicle the subtle shifts that we're making. And so I've been very committed to keeping a journal. And I think that that's really helped me move along. And if I can't ask myself the hard questions out loud, then I ask myself the hard questions in my journal, like things that I won't necessarily, you know what I mean? So you can ask the real hard questions in your journal. Really, really important. So, so the journaling I was doing regularly, and you wanted me to talk about some of the other things that I was
I
doing.
wanted to say your point about discipline is absolutely true. Like, I am the hardest worker when I have a job working for somebody else, right?
Right.
You would watch me work in the restaurant, just like run around like she's like, what is going on, dude? Right?
Yeah.
I do really well working hard for other people, or I also do really well working hard at like athletic or physical tasks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's from being a child, the gymnastics, and like I know what to do with that. But in terms of like the doing something that for my own personal growth, not like I think I've gotten pretty good at being honest with myself and growing like on the psychological kind of level, but in terms of like pushing myself forward in a way where I can be in control of what I'm doing in the world for how I make a living and how I present myself to everyone. Like, I haven't mastered that skill yet, right? Like, I struggle with applying discipline to something that I want as opposed to something that needs to get done, kind of thing, right? And so your point is like a very good one. I'm very much the same in that when I have a place I have to be on time, I'll show up and I'll bust my ass and I'll do a good job and whatnot. But when it comes to things that would really help me on many levels in life, for some reason, there's always been this confusion, ambivalence, lack of drive to like get it done with the same professionalism that I get it done when somebody else is signing the paycheck, kind of thing. And so I commend you for figuring that out, and I can learn some things from you. But why don't you tell us about what this process led to, both in terms of the books that you have both written and are writing, and the ways you're cataloging your journey, not just in your own little book at home, but online, so that people can check.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I published this book last year, and again, it went through a lot of changes, and it turned out to be it's actually a really decent book. It's a collection of short stories, and the stories are they're very intimate. They're raw. They have to do with body. They have to do with relationships. They have to do with love loss. They have to do with all kinds of things. But people have responded very very positively to my book. So I published that at the end of last year. I had set a goal. I had set my release date for November, and then I worked backwards and said, well, if that's the case, then I need to be editing by this month and this and that. So I literally did a timeline, and I found that was really helpful. So that was part of the discipline. I kind of said, all right, if I'm going to show up for others, I'm going to show up for myself the same way. I'm going to do a timeline, and I'm going to commit to writing so much every week, and then having that every month. And then you get to a certain point, and now it's the editing process, and then, the publishing process afterwards. So I went through that process, and I learned, I had to learn as I went, because I had never done it before, and I was self-publishing. So I had to, look at the videos and, take a little class and kind of figure all this stuff. So I figured it out all the way through, all of the steps that I needed to learn. And I was like, and then when I got to the end, I was like, I can do this again. Right? I'm going to do even more in 2021. And so I set goals for 2021, because I do love to write. That I have a master's in creative writing. I have some skills in writing, and I love to write. So why wouldn't I continue to do it? So I decided that I was going to publish a couple of books in 2021, because we were on the journey together, and I was starting to learn a lot and discover a lot. Like a lot of the things we're talking about today, this was a whole process of discovery for me, and I wanted to start chronicling it. And so I have two Instagram accounts. I have one for my writing, Patti Lucia Writes, and then I have another one that's called This Amazing Body, and this is all about my journey with my body, my journey with food, and and self-discovery, self-care, self-nurturing, and I call it This Amazing Body because I've discovered that, and it was kind of a way of owning that I do have an amazing body. That it may not be the kind of body that's called amazing on the cover of Vogue, but my body, like functionally, what it does, like we have amazing bodies. And so it's a way of honoring it and honoring the journey of my body. So I chronicle that. So I keep my Instagram, and I chronicle my journey on the Instagram. And so my book, one of the books is going to be This Amazing Body. It's kind of all about my journey with my body. And then of course the other one is a cookbook with stories. So those are my two writing projects that I am working on. What was that, Laura?
Is it a vegan cookbook or carnivore?
And this is kind of a struggle. It's kind of interesting, because people have been wanting me to write a cookbook with all the recipes from my cafe. And my cafe was mostly vegan, right? So I have decided that I am going to include all kinds of food in it. So I'll be including, so there'll be the vegan recipes, and there'll be the vegetarian and the meat. And I plan on being really, really honest. And I actually see this cookbook as a release, like as a release of an era in my life that I will release fondly, but it is not necessarily the food that I continue to eat. That my journey has gone a different way because I'm listening to my body. So that's going to be one of the stories in the cookbook.
Listening to your body is, I was going through the week that you started really talking about listening to your body in terms of like you had pushed yourself a little too far as far as the exercise. We were talking about that on your Instagram account. And, I was kind of going through a similar thing. I've been, struggling on and off for a couple of years with a back situation. And I've just been in absolute large denial to a certain extent about it, even though it was basically controlling my life. And I kept trying to just, everything was about getting to this place where I used to be able to run 10 miles 5 days a week again and blah, 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 blah. But I didn't want to do certain things that I needed to do to take care of myself and whatnot. And just, I don't know if it's synchronistically or what happened, but that same week you were going through that, it was like, okay, I'm going to slow down and I'm just going to walk this week. And then I'm going to start building back in a way where I listen based on how my body is feeling that day. And as much as I don't like doing it, I'm going to start stretching. Right. And pretty quickly now, all of a sudden, my back is not bothering me. I'm running a lot better. I'm
What
starting.
did you tell me yesterday?
I confess she's been trying to push me for years to stretch, and I didn't want to because I had pushed that away after gymnastics was over because I hated it. But the stretching works and the listening to my body. And if my back feels a little funny, then I just walk that day and it is okay. There'll be another day to run later. And learning to listen to our bodies is, you know, even for someone who knows all the things I know about the body and exercise and food and whatnot, like I still have a little fucking Hitler running around inside of me that thinks I should be able to do, you know, all this stuff just because I did it one time before or whatever, right? Learning to listen to my body and accept what it can do that day. It's been interesting to sort of be in sync with you sort of in that process. And then another thing that sort of came to light through your process with the amazing body is this relationship, this struggle you have had with your legs in particular throughout your whole life. And Laura, when, you know, like when I first met Laura, and it's an ongoing thing, although it's much better, she's been in this sort of battle with her legs for her whole life as well. I think there's a lot of women that are. I'm not in a battle with my legs. That's one part of my body that I'm not in a battle with. But, you know, she felt, it felt nice to her to know that there was somebody else who had kind of knew that struggle, but who also was sort of coming to terms with it and learning to love yourself. And like, did you have something you wanted to say about that? You circled something out for me.
I don't know that I had anything specific. I just, like, it moved me when she told me that about your learning to love your legs and that you were okay with them and you've made peace with them. Wow. I didn't know anybody else had problems with their legs. I thought it was just me. And I just felt like, wow, this is so, it is possible, you know, for me to learn to love my legs. And I'm not in the battle with them that I have been in. And I have lost weight and I'm not constantly focused on what does my butt look in my pants, and are my pants too tight on my thighs, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And I don't know. I just it was moving for me to hear your story.
I think the point is that we've both been appreciating following your work as well.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. I mean, like, you think about your legs, and this is one of those things that people have attitudes. It's like, you know, some of us have thick legs. You know, some of us just have thick legs, and they do tend to be a little more muscular when they're thicker. But there are all these attitudes about thick legs, and I think that thick legs are also associated with kind of loose women, or, you know, whatever. There are all these subtle or not so subtle attitudes about it, but, you know, but certainly not very, you know, like, you know, in some communities not very attractive, in other communities very attractive. By the way, it really depends on where you are, but, you know, it's a cultural thing. But when my process began, and actually it was the first time that I related to my body as amazing, and that was one day at the cafe. I was kind of very, very contemplative, and I went for a walk because I was upset with my legs because, you know, well, they're too thick, and also one in particular was bothering me because of varicose veins, and I was being really impatient and not liking my legs at all. And when I went for a walk, I had to take inventory. And I realized that actually my legs were pretty amazing because they kept me up and I kept going, and I was able to work very, very long hours in the restaurant. And I was able to do all of these things because my legs kept me up and kept me going. And when I started to kind of take inventory of what they actually did for me, I said, no, you know what? I'm going to change my language about that. And I'm going to say, no, they're actually really amazing. My legs are amazing. You know, because and then I've kind of just expanded it to my body. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to look at, you know, oh, this is too much or too little or too this or too that or not enough this or that. But actually my body, my whole body is amazing. But it did begin that morning that I kind of had this meditative walk. I still owned my cafe, and I decided that I was going to call my legs amazing. Yeah, because they really, really are, because of what they have done for me my whole life. They just haven't let me down. they've never, they've never let me down. So.
And they really lived up to the name, because now at 62, you're running several miles a week again. So there you go.
That's right. So, and I do in like, just in the terms of the physical stuff that you were talking about. So, so I started running. I swim now, because when I was going through a similar struggle as you, and realizing that running every day and running more and more, it was really starting to bother my legs. Like, my legs were saying, this is too much. And I wanted to ignore them. I was listening, but I wasn't really honoring what they're requesting, because they were, kind of complaining. And when we had that conversation, I decided I was going to start swimming, and I've come to really love swimming.
You and I had a conversation, not you and your legs this time. It was you and I had a conversation.
Yeah, it was you and I. Yeah, you and I had this conversation. But yeah, so I started swimming, and now I've incorporated swimming and then running, and all of that, and just kind of working out what's going to be best for me. But I'm very active now, in terms of what I'm doing for.
Come on, it's calling your name, Patti. I'm just kidding.
Say that again, Em. I didn't hear you.
It's calling your name now, Patti.
Exactly.
Well, so, this was actually really cool and really fun. And I think that there are so many people out there, obviously, particularly women, but I'm sure also some men that can relate to all the things that you've talked about here. And I think that we can all sort of appreciate and admire the transformation you've had over the past year, and encourage you to keep going. Can you tell people where they can find their work, how they can support you, or how they could reach out with you if they want to talk to you based on what you've said here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are interested in my book, the best place to get it would be at pattiluciawrites.com. You can actually, it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but you get a discount. And my book is called Wildflowers and Present Tenses. It's the first in a series, and so you can check out my book on my website, Wildflowers and Present Tenses. If you want to follow the kind of the writing that I do, the kind of the creative writing that I do have a Facebook page and an Instagram, Patti Lucia Writes. And if you're interested in my body journey, my journey with my health, and I say this is my journey towards optimal health in my postmenopausal years. That's kind of how I frame it. You can find me on Instagram at This Amazing Body, and follow me there, and it'll be awesome. And you can contact me, message me through Instagram, and I'd be happy to talk to people.
Awesome. Well, Patti, it's really cool when I can, look up to my own client, right? So I enjoyed working with you. We still work together, so I'm enjoying this process as it is, and I enjoy learning from you as well. And I want to congratulate you on all of your success, and to encourage you to keep going, because we have no clue where the limit is. So thank you for reaching out to me, and for adding to my life, and for joining us today on the show.
Thanks, Sam. This has been a blast.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Next time.
Thank you.
If anybody would like to become a client, you can reach out to me at emilycmoyer@protonmail.com. Website is getting close, should be ready in a few weeks, so I'll let people know where that is. And of course, you guys know where you can find all my other work and support me at patreon.com/offplanet media. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye. Bye.